Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. My name is Irfan, and I am the chairman of Planning and Development Board in Punjab, Government of Pakistan. At the outset, once we were sitting in the speaker's room, I just raised a point that I said, what kind of women empowerment are we talking about? There are just 2 ladies and 6 gentlemen. So this is a gender imbalance right here in the panel, which we can see. And then the chairperson came up and said, no, 2 ladies are enough for 4 people, 4 men. I said, thank you very much for clearing it. I said, thank you very much for clearing it. I always thought they are good for 8 people.
That's true.
So with this, let me tell you, it's a privilege to address such an august audience, and that too on a subject germane to progress, well-being, and development of our societies. The concept of sustainable development enshrines the development that meets the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That means whatever we're doing it, not doing it at the cost of future generations. One of the central themes of this concept is to balance between the economic, social, and environmental objectives of sustainable development and integrate them wherever possible, and if it is not possible, then have a trade-off between these objectives. Social sustainability involves social equality, regardless of gender, ethnicity, color, or religion, etc. Gender equality translates directly into empowerment of women to build stronger economies, achieve developmental goals, and improve the quality of life of women, men, and communities. Although gender gaps have narrowed over the past 2 decades, yet substantial inequalities remain across every developmental priority, from political participation to economic inclusion, and remain a significant challenge across all sectors. Gender gaps have almost been eliminated in primary education and fast reducing in secondary education. In fact, in few of the countries, it has reversed. Countries like Latin America, Caribbean, and East Asia. Among developing countries, girls now outnumber boys in 45 countries at secondary level and in 60 countries at university level. On the other, greater gender equality can enhance productivity, reduce poverty, and make institutions more representatives. And on the other hand, failure to close gender gaps is invariably translated into nations' inability to advance on sustainable development outcomes. Women now represent 40% of global labor force, 43% of agricultural labor force, and more than half the world's university students. And with this strength, if used appropriately by imparting skills and eliminating barriers that discriminate against women, the productivity can increase to no less than 25%. In many countries, women access to resources and their opportunities to manage conditions and adapt are curtailed by structural norms and discrimination. Consequently, they often tend to suffer disproportionately from environmental degradation and natural disasters. As in such a situation, gender inequalities are generally magnified. In Pakistan, of the poor who are far more vulnerable to environmental damages, 70% are women. As they lack access to land, agriculture technologies, and financial capital, which blocks their opportunities to diversify their livelihood or increase resilience in the face of climate change. Decreasing availability of clean water, agriculture production, access to crop residues and biomass for energy, and increasing risk of drought are all the areas where women experience severe negative impact. Therefore, being directly an affected party, they need to be involved in policy-making roles with an aim to mitigate the inequalities. In this context, in Pakistan, National Sustainable Development Strategy has been announced, which envisions to evolve a just and harmonious society in the country through promotion of a vibrant and equitable economic growth without over-exploitation of natural resources, with fair distribution of developmental dividends to all, in particular to the marginalized, poor, and vulnerable in the society and to the future generation. The rights of women are further protected through appropriate legislations by the national and provincial legislatures, such as protection of women against harassment, protection of ownership of lands, and its compulsory partition once it is required by the women, protection against violence, and protection of female house workers. Women Empowerment Package of 2012 in Punjab mandates 1/3 representation of women in all the public sector companies' board of directors. With these changes of regulatory framework, we believe that women should be able to engage in decent work, reduce their time burdens, and have access to and control over land and productive assets, as well as energy, water and sanitation, health, and education, which plays a pivotal role in developing human capital. Lack of education, ladies and gentlemen, is connected to women's inability to form social relationships, participate in decision-making process of household, company, community, or the country. The governments, by making its priority, can make a change in other fronts such as health, early childhood care, nutrition, water and sanitation, community empowerment, and reduction of child labor, because all of them would be reduced if the women are empowered and we reduce the gender inequalities. Facilitators and communities need to develop sensitization program to eliminate gender stereotypes where they create obstacles for the opportunities for women, men, and children to work together towards sustainable societies. In today's globalized world, forces such as trade openness and spread of low-cost information and communication technologies have the potential to reduce gender disparities by connecting women to market and economic opportunities. The policymakers, therefore, our suggestion would be to focus on those gender gaps where the payoffs for development are potentially the largest, tackle the multiple constraints that limit the progress, and prioritize them to address these constraints, whether simultaneously or sequentially. Remove the constraints by facilitating and providing infrastructure and regulatory framework, tackle the information problem and institutional biases that work against women, such as quota, etc. Take measures to increase women's control over household resources and laws that enhance the ability of women to accumulate assets. Enhance budgetary allocation for closing the gender gap. While domestic policy action is crucial, the international community can play a role in complementing these efforts, more generally in supporting evidence-based public action through better data, impact evaluation, and learning. In some areas, it may require new or additional action on multiple fronts, like enhanced cooperation and coordination to foster innovation and learning, and more effective partnerships. Now, these partnerships may not be restricted to only governments and development agencies, but they may also include the private sector, civil society organizations, and the academic institutions in developing and developed countries. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for patient hearing, for patient listening, and I end with a quote from a report to the Environment Advisory Council of Sweden by Mr. Johnson. I quote, "What we know about the extent to which women globally live in a more sustainable way than men, leave a smaller ecological footprint, and cause less climate change." So we must support this cause. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.